Good afternoon and welcome once again to Wave Your Grades on KUAW.org. KUAW.org, knowledge, understanding, and wisdom originating from the W.E.B. Du Bois Learning Center in Kansas City, Missouri. We get an opportunity on Saturdays to pay tribute to those who are in military service and or have been. Today is going to be a very special program that will feature some very special people in the life of the civil rights movement in the United States of America as we pay particular tribute to the passing of Representative John Lewis and civil rights icon C.T. Vivian. Before I introduce our very special guest, let me begin the program with two particular thank yous. Thank you number one is very personal. I want to thank wonderful Wanda Boyd for being Mrs. Wanda Boyd for 33 years as of this day, July 18th. It was July 18th, 1987, when she allowed me to call her by a different last name, and she is now wonderful Wanda Boyd. Thank you, darling, for celebrating our anniversary on this day. Thank you, number two, to Valencia Broadus and the Smart Club, who were poised to give us a report on what those young people are doing, not only in behalf of those who serve, but to the delight of those who serve. As the young people in the Smart Club come to us on Wave Your Grades, helping us to understand what they are doing to advance the cause of freedom, liberty, and excellence. And they deferred today's program, understanding that we wanted to pay this particular tribute. Inasmuch as this announcement just came yesterday, you can see how quickly they made themselves flexible for us, and we look forward to their being with us in the very near future. Thank you, Attorney Valencia Broadus and the Smart Club. My name is Carl Boyd. I am your host on Wave Your Grade, Saturdays at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. Our very special guest this afternoon is on Eastern Standard Time. Her name is very familiar, not only across the United States, but internationally. Cheryl Brown Henderson, president of the Brown Foundation, going all the way back to 1954 with Brown versus the Topeka Board of Education, and establishing that foundation some years later. Cheryl Brown Henderson, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Hello, Carl. Thank you so very much on this sad day.
It is a sad day when we think in terms of the fact that John Lewis was 80 years old. Even while we lament the sadness, we can certainly appreciate his tenure. So for many decades, he was at the forefront of movements that would cause us to never stop, never say never. And let me just, as I ask about your encounters with John Lewis from the standpoint of Brown versus the Topeka Board of Education, will you first just introduce Cheryl Brown Henderson to our listening audience?
Yes, Carl and I go back many, many decades, and in the midst of all of this, life does have a way of showing up. So I do want to congratulate you on your 33 years of marriage, Carl.
Thank you. Thank you.
John Lewis was a teacher above all else, as was C.T. Vivian and Dr. King and all of those who taught us the lessons of what it would take to have democracy express itself and show up in our lives. We had to be full participants. The lessons they left for us. I met John Lewis more than almost 2 decades ago.
Wow.
When I was working on a project in Washington, D.C., to establish a Brown v. Board of Education National Historic Site. My mother met C.T. Vivian when she was honored at the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis, Tennessee. And so this morning I posted on the Brown Foundation Facebook page photos of those encounters. Congressman John Lewis traveled to Topeka on 3 occasions. The first occasion was during that legislative process to establish a park for this history. The second occasion was to lecture for us at one of the large churches and to talk about his connection to Brown v. Board and the civil rights movement. And the third time was to serve as the Oliver L. Brown Distinguished Scholar for Diversity Issues. And he talked about his graphic novel called March. So it was our honor, it was our privilege to be in his presence on several occasions, both in Washington, D.C. and in Topeka, Kansas, around these issues.
One of the things that I like to recall was a ride to the airport from Topeka, Kansas, with Juan Williams. And Juan Williams was talking about Thurgood Marshall. So while this is indeed a tribute to John Lewis, it might be well for our audience to find out a little more about, look at this, Cheryl Brown Henderson, 1954, this many years later, how you view then and now.
Well, 1954, Brown versus the Board of Education is considered by legal scholars and historians and African American activists as the grandfather of African American achievement.
Mm-hmm.
And it is so because Brown v. Board set legal precedent for the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, the Equal Protection Under the Law clause, which of course we know African Americans, our rights were being subverted and our constitutional rights. And so Brown v. Board began to peel back the layers of what was being denied and peel back the layers of the fact that the Constitution did in fact apply to all of us as people of color. Thurgood Marshall and Robert Carter and Jack Greenberg and Constance Baker Motley and a whole host of attorneys worked for more than 2 decades to bring about this change. They started in higher education, case in Missouri, the Gaines case, University of Missouri Law School. They moved to Oklahoma and then on to Texas before making their way to the K-12 system and challenging schools that were segregated based on race. But do understand this, that even though schools were the battlefront, their choice of battlefront, it was all of society that was the target. And the fact that African Americans were being disenfranchised across the board. They selected schools as a way to take a public entity, tax supported by all of us, and challenge the notion that African Americans' rights could be set aside, subverted, ignored. We could be brutalized through Jim Crow laws and black codes and indiscriminate lynchings, all for the cause of this hierarchy and this artificial barrier established by the broader community.
Now, as you say that, I am so pleased. Had the occasion just yesterday to be among a group of high school students and wanted them to discuss from their perspective 2020, the education landscape and how they feel about reopening schools, how they feel about distance learning versus in-person learning. And it always causes me to wonder, Cheryl Brown Henderson, not just among young people, but among Americans in general, how closely we hold to the significance of 1954. And as Cheryl Brown Henderson looks at our quest to do something called, quote, return to normalcy, unquote, and the implications of what we are referring to as reopening schools in 2020, how do you see the education landscape today?
Well, this health crisis, the pandemic, as it's commonly known, is something none of us could have anticipated, and it's certainly something none of us are truly prepared to engage with. I'll put it that way. And in opening schools, distance learning has to be the task at hand. We don't want to jeopardize any of our future, and young people are our future, by opening schools and believing that they can be present in the kind of contact that it would require to be in a classroom. So I know that universities and the K-12 system are scrambling, trying to figure out how do we keep our children from losing ground and not jeopardize their health and their very lives at the same time. Distance learning can be challenging, but I always tell young people that education is, first of all, the key to everything. It's the foundation. Without an education, you cannot expect to achieve anything in life, and that's whether it's an academic education through higher ed or whether it's after high school you seek a trade, which is respectable and just as necessary as a college education. But you have to apply yourself. So whether you're sitting in front of a computer, you have to set those goals and put in the work. Nothing can be done halfway and expect to have the kind of life and to make the kind of contribution that we need from you. So I would say, follow whatever your school district comes up with. If it's virtual learning, give it your all. If it's occasional in-person learning, protect yourselves, in the midst of what these adults are scrambling to try to figure out. But above all else, apply yourselves knowing that your opportunity is in your hands.
When we think in terms of what you have faced, what you have encountered over the decades, when you see images of John Lewis at the Edmund Pettus Bridge, when you think about C.T. Vivian, who, as peaceful as he was, having to face being just about bludgeoned, as it were, how encouraging is their fortitude during their time to your continued quest to bring equality to America's soil?
Well, I tell you that the thing that's giving me the most hope, because some of us are, I don't like the phrase necessarily, but aging out.
Mm-hmm.
And so our protest is now more about writing the letters and making the calls to congressional representatives and making sure we get people to the polls. That it's not being in the streets as we once were and sitting in academic administrative halls for various courses and various rights. But I do think that what we've seen over the past few months with going on a few months with the Black Lives Matter movement, the movement that's now very diverse in terms of colors and creeds, people understand that it's now or never. We are facing an administration that's trying to reestablish the hierarchy that John Lewis and C.T. Vivian fought to dismantle, the hierarchy that says that people of color are less significant, that they are not as privileged as others. So I think rather than anything else, I want these young people to recognize that we've been where they are, and that even though we may not have the legs to be out marching with them, we have the wisdom of what we experience. We can inform them of how marches can become effective, how they can translate from the street to the boardroom to the halls of Congress, and it is a necessity. The power that we're all seeking is our voice, but the change that we all need is our vote.
When I think about the Brown Foundation, when I think about Brown v. Topeka, a couple of things come to mind, and one is, how can we, regular citizens, help, support, be a part of the ongoing efforts of the Brown Foundation? And would you, if you would please, describe the foundation edifice in Topeka, Kansas, and what is the status of being able to visit now?
I appreciate that. The Brown Foundation is an entity that supersedes the edifice that you're referring to. The edifice that you're referring to is how I met John Lewis. We were trying to establish a Brown v. Board National Park, which is that edifice and can be visited,
Yes.
with social distancing and mask and whatever regulations that the federal government has put in place for national parks. The Brown Foundation, as a separate entity, continues to provide classroom teachers with curriculum and online opportunities to educate their students about this history. Um, History runs deep around this issue, and believe it or not, Kansas was front and center. Years before there was even an NAACP on this struggle, Kansas African American parents on this journey to equal educational opportunity and constitutional rights for African Americans. We can be visited most easily on our website, which is brownvboard.org. There are curriculum resources you can order there. There are historic images you can view there. There is research material that you can access there. As you view distance learning, this is another way to approach Brown's history, and you can do it electronically on our website.
We can call the roll, as it were, of icons in the civil rights movement from the past and bring it all the way up to the unfortunately passing again C.T. Vivian, Representative John Lewis. But there are some folks with whom you work or folks whom you have met who are continuing to strive for our rights and equality. And if you did a shout out, as it were, are there some people with whom you work to whom you might want to say, thank you, and we are still behind you?
Well, I would absolutely. Martin Luther King III is certainly someone, and his sister, Reverend Bernice King, who is working very closely with the SCLC. It is still a viable organization. I would also give a shout out to Sherilyn Ifill, who is our Thurgood Marshall, our generation's Thurgood Marshall. She's head of the Legal Defense Fund that was established by Thurgood Marshall. And after Justice Marshall was appointed to Solicitor General by Lyndon Johnson, and Jack Greenberg moved into that role. And after Jack Greenberg, Ted Shaw moved into that role, Aileen Steele and then Ted Shaw, and now Sherilyn Ifill. These are people that are litigating every day voter suppression cases. School desegregation has not gone away. We're still battling over that. So these are people that are today's warriors. They are today's John Lewis's. They are today's C.T. Vivians. And I would give a shout out, and I would encourage you to learn about these folks.
Yes.
Because
yes.
they are the ones that are on the ground today.
This is something that you led me to just in terms of those names mentioned. How good a job or how poorly a job, as it relates to curricula across the United States of America, are we doing in teaching and preserving the legacy of those folks and others whom you know, in terms of helping our children to know them and to appreciate them? How are we doing? And I think you've already alluded to how we need to do.
I think that's an excellent question, because you cannot aspire to be what you're not aware of. So if you're not aware of those people like Shirley Chisholm, who was first African American woman elected to Congress, if you're not aware of Ella Baker, who helped establish the Southern movement through SCLC, if you're not aware of Fannie Lou Hamer, a woman that was uneducated but would not be denied the right to participate in the Democratic National Convention, if you're not aware of people that have not only paved the way, but have really helped this country heal itself, you can't aspire to be that leader. You can't understand the need to be an active voter. You can't understand the need to even run for office. I think about there in Kansas City with Emmanuel Cleaver and others who are present day, setting an example and I hope showing young people what's possible. Or I think about Dr. Carmeletta Williams, who's with the Black Archives of Mid-America, who every day work to preserve our stories so that they can be accessed by our young people. Textbooks are not going to be as responsive, and it breaks my heart because it requires educators to have the time, which they seldom do, to go the second mile to research these folks and bring them to the attention of our young people in the classroom.
Well, you know, I am so glad that the first name you mentioned on that second part of my question was Shirley Chisholm. When I think about Carol Moseley Braun, when I think about Reverend Jesse Jackson, when I think about President Barack Obama, children will be asked in the future who first approached running for the presidency from an African American position. Too many would forget the leadership of Shirley Chisholm. And
No, you're absolutely right. And Shirley Chisholm was a masterful orator, and she was a woman not simply of competence, but she understood, that she was someone that had every right to be in the halls of Congress. She was someone that had every right to be considered for the leadership of this nation. It takes the kind of internal fortitude and strength. You think about, Rosa Parks and what she experienced with being asked to stand and then arrested because she didn't stand for a white man on a bus. This was a very quiet woman, but she had the internal fortitude. She recognized that what she would do would be an opportunity to change the lives of so many others. Sometimes we're not always willing to sacrifice for people we don't know, but that's what it has taken, and that's what it will continue to take.
I am so selfishly pleased that I know you and your family. When I think about Rosa Parks, when I think about, again, Juan Williams, when I think about John Lewis and Cheryl Brown Henderson, you can name so many others. On the May 17th observations in Topeka, Kansas, the humility of Rosa Parks when she was in your presence, when she was with your family, when she testified that there were those who went before her, playing down how impactful her role was. I think that much of that results from how your family has invited history to visit you and us. I just want to say thank you for that.
Well, you're very welcome. I mean, it is so important for us to use our networks, to use our knowledge to make sure we, uplift other folks. When we started the Brown Foundation, one of the principal activities was to bring the intersectionality of history, to bring history to Topeka, so that those that have lived among Brown and when you know people, you're not quite as enamored with them. But when you bring in that connection, we've had people come in that were in the Black Panther Party, and I was very pleased by that because people so often misunderstood that aspect of the civil rights movement. So to bring in the gentleman that's now in Congress, I'm losing his name, who was in the Black Panther Party, to talk about the significance of what they did and the legacy of that aspect of the civil rights movement, and to bring in people like Ossie Davis and Ruby Dee, who through the platform of theater and entertainment were civil rights activists, to bring in Bill Russell, who used athletics as a tool to say I am a man, and to not be, his back was not bent by anyone. And he talked about how his father, who was a single father, his mother had passed, and his grandfather established a school in Louisiana. There's so many backstories that all of these significant people have. To give us a chance to hear those stories, I believe, would be a true pivot for most of our young people and for those of us that want to continue learning.
I cannot believe that we are at the end of our half hour already. I don't know if you were thinking of Bobby Rush from Chicago.
Yes, thank you. Bobby Rush, yes.
Absolutely. But let me ask that you, in as much as our time is running down, give whatever final remarks you want to give, and then please repeat how we can contact Cheryl Brown Henderson.
Okay. I would just speak to the youth and just say that what you're doing now, what you're seeing now, whether you're called upon or feel compelled to join the demonstrations in the streets of our nations, whether you're called upon or you feel compelled to write letters to Congress people or attend school board meetings or city council meetings, you cannot sit idly by. November 3rd will be here before we know it. And there are too many things going on that are subverting our rights today. We cannot afford to sit out this election. And it will be shame on you if you do not honor C.T. Vivian and John Lewis and all the others that fought for our right to vote by staying at home. We cannot allow what we're seeing now to stand. You can reach us and read our statements about what's going on now at brownvboard.org. Our phone number is there, always willing to talk to young people, interact with them around these issues, but please vote.
I cannot thank you enough, Cheryl Brown Henderson, for the person you are, for your family, just history in its reality at this moment. Thank you so much for being who you are and for doing all that you do. God bless you, Cheryl Brown Henderson. You are more than welcome. Bye-bye. This is Wave Your Grades. We're on KUAW.org. KUAW emanates from the W.E.B. Du Bois Learning Center in Kansas City, Missouri. Our station, founded by Louis George Walker, president of the Black Family Awareness Technology Association. The Black Family Awareness Technology Association. Okay. But at any rate, when the word was not even a well-known cliche, Louis George Walker and the Black Family Awareness Technology Association was indeed closing the digital divide. We are pleased, we are honored that we have an opportunity to do the Wave Your Grades program on Saturdays via www.kuaw.org. My name is Carl Boyd. Wave Your Grades is really a name that we use to ask that students go beyond waving the flag, but that indeed they wave their grades, they wave their public service, they wave their leadership, they wave their turnaround, that indeed they will wave their grades. Our second very special guest is with us this afternoon, and we are paying tribute to John Lewis. Interestingly enough, with our first guest, Cheryl Brown Henderson, Brown versus Topeka, the Brown Foundation, and a personal relationship with Representative John Lewis, I am blessed that I have a personal relationship with my sister, Dr. Edith Coleman. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. Hello to you. Uh-oh. Did I lose her? Okay.
Oh, hello. You're not very loud. Let me turn my volume up.
Did you hear that, Brother Lewis? She said I wasn't loud.
Maybe. I can hear a little better.
Okay. We'll continue to work with that and see. Are we okay now? Uh-oh. We are having volume difficulty. I'm sure that
Okay, there. It's a little better now.
Okay, then let me indicate that I so appreciate the fact that you made yourself available to us. Your name is Dr. Edith Coleman.
All right. Thank you very much for asking me, Brother Carl Boyd. I know we have experienced several of the broadcasts together, and it's something that even though I'm not doing as much as I used to do, but I can still talk.
Well,
so thank you for inviting me today. I really appreciate it.
Well, indulge my boast, but along with Big John Coleman, Willie Hartman, and um, Ron Miller, original board members for our Stoots for Boots parent organization, sponsoring this program. And by the way, I don't know if you heard the beginning of the program, but I was thanking Wonderful Wanda for being with me for 33 years. This is our 33rd anniversary, July 18th.
Fantastic.
I agree.
Congratulations to both of you.
Thank you so much. You know, and you made yourself available that the focus of the program is on John Lewis. But if you would allow us, please, can we start with a focus on Dr. Edith Coleman? I know that you have various areas of expertise, but how would you characterize your career?
I would say that it's multifaceted in that I was an educator, and I started out in elementary school, and then I moved up to middle school, and I did change things. The way I was presenting, I began to work for the University of Kansas, and so I had a summer enrichment program, which was an academic program to begin to plant the seeds of the future in the younger people in our society, in our race, in whatever you would say they're in our schools, in our churches. And and then when I decided to do a doctorate degree in educational policy, administration, and leadership, then I took a position with the University of Kansas, and I taught there. And and I also taught in between at the community college and Penn Valley and the Pioneer campus. And so I've had variations in age groups and focus and intensity and all those kinds of things. In addition to that, I was a church musician for many, many years. I played gospel music, and most of it, I could read music, but most of it was by ear, and I really enjoyed that. And then I still was working with young people when I did weddings, and I did fashion shows to allow organizations that needed some type of fundraiser to get funding together for students who were needy and could use the assistance. And so whether they were going to high school by that time or college, or and then some students were even taking college classes at the high school level. And then I topped it all by teaching adult basic education, ABE classes. And I had the wonderful experience of being able to work with students who had decided that they quituated, I used to say to them, quituated school, but they decided to come back. And so I had the honor of working with them, and the first group of students that I worked with, I got a HUD grant and was able to get them through the one of the programs at Park University.
My goodness.
And so that's why I say it's multifaceted.
No doubt.
In that I did different things. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And I guess as the term versatility yielded to multitasking and having a variety of experiences, those of us who know you have benefited from that. And let me indicate to you that in the first half of this hour, had the honor, the pleasure of speaking with Cheryl Brown Henderson, Brown v. Topeka, and it is interesting that there is a direct association there. So please tell us about Edith Coleman's family as it relates to that historic event.
All right, I certainly will be glad to. My aunt, whose name was Lucinda Todd, she was my dad's sister. She was the secretary of the NAACP in Topeka back in the 1950s. And she saw that her daughter was not going to be able to go to the school that provided musical experiences, both in training and in participation. And so she did not want her daughter to be denied that. So she then talked with the then president of the NAACP and told him that she would like to see the NAACP get involved in something that will lawfully permit the students of color to participate in the same extracurricular activities that the other schools were doing. And so her daughter had to ride the bus and get to school, and one day she saw it was slick on the street and where Nancy, her daughter, caught the bus, and the bus almost slid into them and could have very well have killed Nancy.
I see.
So that's when she decided, I'm going to write the letter. In 1954, she did write the letter and asked the lawyers, both those at Topeka and those in the federal government, and to come to Topeka and allow a lawsuit to be presented that would benefit not only her daughter and the kids in Topeka, but all over the nation. And she didn't realize how much of an impact it would have. Even now today, we still see Aunt Cindy's impact from her determination. And she was one of those quiet people that she did not drive a car. She didn't have a driver's license when she was doing this. So she walked to the homes of the other kids that she was hoping to get their parents involved and in support of a lawsuit, and then let their students also be plaintiffs as part of the lawsuit. And so she worked very diligently. She worked hard. She found out that there were those people that did not agree with her, but she kept working toward her goal of seeing things improve in the educational arena, not only for her child, but for all the rest of us. And I say us because her daughter and I are first cousins, and we're the same age. No. So we spent time in the summers. I would come to Topeka visiting, and I really did not know, because of my young age, I guess, I really didn't know what was actually going on. I mean, I saw little things that I thought were different.
Yes.
But I didn't know what it was involved with. And once I learned about that, and once the Brown case came into being, it was quite an experience to know that someone in my family had initiated this from the beginning. And it was also a wonderful experience to know that it was not stopped or prevented from being carried out in the courts. And as you probably are aware, well, I know you're aware, but I hope that many of your listening audience people are aware that Aunt Cindy was a native Kansan, graduated from college in Pittsburgh, Kansas, and then you only had to have 2 years of college to be able to teach. She started teaching in Topeka, but she had to quit because she got married, and they didn't allow married women to work out of the home, not in as a teacher.
Wow.
At that time. So she had to do this. She made many sacrifices.
Absolutely.
In order to get this to happen. And the Brown family joined in too. And now there is a school that is named for Aunt Cindy.
Oh.
Aunt Cindy. And there is, if you were going to Topeka and you exit off of I-70 onto the 10th Street Bridge, you'll see a sign that says Lucinda Todd Bridge.
Thank you very much. I suspected that it might not be named Aunt Cindy, but all of us don't have that personal relationship that you have. And
that's right.
As I think about your sharing with Cheryl Brown Henderson being that close to an historic decision, you also have something in common in that you have a relationship with John Lewis, and of course, all of us mourn the passing of C.T. Vivian and John Lewis on this day. But you had an interesting relationship where that is concerned. So talk a moment, if you would, please, about John Lewis.
All right, I sure will. I was blessed to have a cousin in our family that used to be Dr. Martin Luther King's secretary. And when he was making the initial moves and standing up for the rights of our people as much as possible. And of course, he was a dynamic leader. And John Lewis was, there is no question that he was too. And so because of the fact that my cousin used to be his secretary, and her cousin was the business manager for Dr. Martin Luther King in those early days, then she named the Trumpet Awards, because she was working for CNN television back then, and she started the Trumpet Awards I guess that would be about 29 years ago, because she retired from that a couple of years ago. And she named the Trumpet Awards for Dr. Martin Luther King because he used to sound the trumpet for justice, is what a lot of people said about him. So she took that as the mantra, you know, to have something where the focus of that program, the Trumpet Awards, was to give awards mainly to minority people, not limited to, but mainly to minority people who were outstanding in their field and who worked for the rights of others, civil rights and other rights of others. And of course, you know that John Lewis was one of the icons of that time. My husband and I, Big John Coleman, used to go to Atlanta every year for many, many years for the Trumpet Awards. And we, on several different occasions, we had the opportunity to meet the awardees and their mates and sometimes their family members. And we also had a chance to talk to them and find out about how they had focused their intensive efforts on trying to make things better for people of color. They wanted to make sure that we were not denied anything that we were supposed to have. And knowing that John Lewis came from, I think it was Mississippi, where he was born and reared, and he always had a commitment that he made to himself and then to the public at large, and I'm speaking mainly of minority public
Yes.
members. And he always said, yeah, you may get into some trouble, but it's going to be good trouble.
Yes.
So get into some good trouble. And he told John and I that one time. And he said to John, he says, well, you're 6'6". I would just imagine that that's a real advantage for you, whatever you're fighting for. And he said, use it to make more good trouble. So when we would go to Trumpet Awards and sometimes other places, we would see him. And it was this cousin of mine, Zernona Clayton Brady, that introduced John Lewis to his wife.
Yes.
The lady he wound up marrying. So it's really fantastic. And I say that with no kind of funny stuff when I say fantastic. I'm saying just to know people like that. And he was the kind of person that he knew that we were from the Zenona's family. And if he saw John first, he would say, Mr. Big John, where's that little wife of yours?
Mm-hmm.
Your family members of Miss Clayton's, I know. So we used to look forward to seeing him and knowing that.
Before we get to a point of wrapping up with how you view the landscape today, let me say that John Lewis had a lighter side. Now, let me tell you what I mean by that, and why I'm privileged to be in your life. When I mentioned you to John Lewis, when he was remembering the relationship, he said it with delight, with a smile on his face, and wanted to review anecdotally what that was and Big John being Big John. And I'm only saying that to say this. On this day, if we watch television, if we look at the tributes to John Lewis, and you will see him on that Edmund Pettus Bridge being not just shoved a little bit, but beat up. When you look at him in front of that memorial, when you look at him at the March on Washington, when you look at him as recently as testifying, you will see a very serious, committed, get in good trouble, don't ever give up John Lewis. But I can say that with all of that dedication and commitment, when he heard your name and talking about the family, and he even told us about getting introduced to his wife, we can look back on a life of a person who was not just, he wasn't bitter, he wasn't,
That's right.
He was a real person. And I was glad that I had that opportunity to name drop and see that side of John Lewis. We are coming to the end of this hour, so one of the things I would like to ask my sister, Dr. Edith Coleman, you've been on the forefront for a long time. When you look at the landscape today, are you more optimistic than pessimistic? Where do we need to be going in the United States of America?
I am a mixture of both. There is some optimism, but I certainly believe that we're garnering more of that as the days go by. There is some pessimism because, as it is in anything that in the endeavor that you're involved in, there are those who are not the true believers. But we see more people helping with letting it be known that they are aware that there are justices. There's justice, excuse me, that has to be put in place so that all citizens, all people will have the opportunity to have what is rightfully theirs. And so, of course, it's really heartwarming. Though I cannot get out and walk like we used to, but I can still talk about it, and I can say that I am truly a firm believer that had it not been for the likes of a John Lewis and a C.T. Vivian, Reverend C.T. Vivian, I don't think we would be where we are today. So I'm thankful for that, because I know that Lucinda Todd, my aunt, used to tell me, you can do anything you want to do, Edith. You can be anything you want to be. Just don't stop being it. Keep being it and take somebody with you. So that's what I think John Lewis did. He took lots of people with him. He even sacrificed his own life so that we could have it better. So that's why I say I have more optimism than pessimism, and I'm grateful for that, because I know it was the John Lewises of the world that made a lot of things possible that would not have been otherwise.
Well, I'll tell you this, one of the things that you and I have discussed is the negligence on the part of those who write American history to properly interpret some of those names that you have mentioned, some of the names that we drop when we look at American history, particularly as it relates to the civil rights movement. But let me tell you what I decry even more is the absence in enough history books of names like Dr. Edith Coleman. And the reason that I say that, not patronizingly, but because our world really has changed when it has changed significantly by a lot of people who never make the headlines. They never make the history books, but they are the ones who help those who do. And
you're so right.
I can say from a personal level, and my wife, wonderful Wanda, agrees with me as it relates to our relationship with the Colemans, that the differences that you have made need to be recorded, not for self-aggrandizement, not for you, not for those who are in your society who have helped others get their doctorate degrees, but for posterity who need to see icons who can help them say, I can. And that would include Dr. Edith Coleman. So we thank you so very, very much this day.
You are more than welcome, and I thank you once again for giving me the opportunity to talk to you today and to your listening audience.
Well, please let us do this again, and prayerfully sometime soon.
Okay.
God bless you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. This is Wave Your Grades. We come on every Saturday, 1 until 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. Cheryl Brown Henderson, who came to us from Florida, Eastern Standard Time. But let me just indicate that we once again thank Attorney Valencia Broadus and the Smart Club for giving us this opportunity to do a special tribute to Representative John Lewis, to civil rights icon C.T. Vivian, and others, by the way, who continue to serve us, helping us to refashion a society that has been negligent in so many ways. In future programs, now this is going to be interesting, Louis George Walker, as we look at future programs. We have always looked forward to those days when we could bring in veterans and students into the studio and not only has the fact that there is distance learning taking place during this pandemic changed our contact with the young people, but also just from a physical standpoint, how meticulous you have had to be in keeping the studio pristine, and if there had been guests, observing distance, all of these different things. So, is there a microphone over there that you can use? Is there anything close that you can use in terms of announcements from KUAW.org, access to the station and other things? Can you bring us up to date?
Well, yes. Right now we are still trying to follow the COVID guidelines, but we do allow more than one person in the studio now. We weren't allowing any guests before, but we like to limit that to 3. Okay. That what fits around the table and keeps it kind of not crowded. We don't want people to get crowded up there. And spectators or friends that come in will have to wait in the library or the computer room. Not to say that they're not welcome, but we just can't have a lot of people sitting on the side. But, we're trying to do that. We're also incorporating all of the distance things that we can from Zoom and different media like that. But we do allow for guests in the room, but we're trying to get those numbers down. We have 4 mics, and we don't want any more than 4 people on them, and that would be the host and 3 others. And then we even look at that as keeping that to a minimum.
All right. Man, I was almost going to try to do an interview with you, and then I looked up and we're already at the end of the hour. But in terms of access to KUAW.org and some of the exciting things that are going on around the station and the people who have programs on, so we're going to have to, next time I'm going to start finishing earlier.
Okay.
Because when you email us, you got some good stuff going on.
Yeah, we have a few things that's been happening. We're kind of glad that it's building up, so yes. That's good.
So I will give my Stoots for Boots message for July 18th. We admire all our armed forces. They're the best, and that's the whole truth. And as you study to become the best, we also admire our youth. That is our Stoots for Boots message. My name is Carl Boyd. This has been Wave Your Grades. Thank you, Cheryl Brown Henderson, Dr. Edith Coleman, and gracious God and wonderful Wanda. I'm on my way home.